My older brother took my company, turned my parents against me, and left me sleeping in my car. 3 years later, my phone lit up with his name, and for the first time in his life, he sounded afraid. People always say betrayal hurts more when it comes from blood. I used to think that was just something people said to sound wise. Then my brother proved it to me in a way I will never forget. My name is Adam, and 3 years ago I built a small logistics business from the ground up. It was not glamorous. I was not some genius founder with investors and fancy offices. I was a guy with one used van, one warehouse lease I could barely afford, and a phone that never stopped ringing. I worked 16-hour days, loaded boxes myself, handled customer complaints, drove late-night routes, and slept on an office couch more times than I can count. By the time the company finally started making real money, I thought the hard part was over. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was trusting my older brother, Daniel. Daniel always knew how to talk. He could walk into a room and make people feel like he belonged there, even when he had done absolutely nothing to earn it. Growing up, our parents adored him. He was charming, confident, and always had an explanation ready when things went wrong. I was the opposite. Quiet, practical, easy to overlook. The kind of person people only noticed when they needed something fixed. When Daniel came to me and said he wanted to help grow the business, it felt like maybe things were finally changing between us. He told me I had the operations brain and he had the people skills. He said together we could make the company 10 times bigger. He even told me he was proud of me. I had spent my whole life waiting to hear something like that from him. So I let him in. At first, it actually seemed like a good decision. He brought in 2 decent clients, talked confidently in meetings, and convinced me to think bigger. He pushed for rebranding, a better office, more visibility, and faster expansion. He said if I wanted serious money, I had to stop thinking like a survivor and start thinking like an owner. That line stuck with me. I repeated it to myself so many times that I did not notice what he was doing underneath it. He slowly moved himself into every part of the business that involved perception. He handled the clients. He handled the accountant introductions. He started speaking to our lawyer without me present. He told everyone he was helping me professionalize the company. Meanwhile, I stayed buried in the work. Routes, payroll, vendor disputes, staffing. Real problems, the kind that leave no time to look up. Then came the documents. That part still makes me angry at myself. We were restructuring, or at least that is what he called it. He said we needed cleaner ownership paperwork to secure a major contract. He kept it casual. Just sign this, just initial that, standard stuff, timing matters, clients are waiting. I was exhausted, behind on deliveries, and trying to solve 3 emergencies at once. So I signed. A month later, I found out the company was no longer really mine. I wish I could tell you there was one dramatic moment, one single reveal, one clear movie scene where everything shattered. The truth was uglier than that. It happened in layers. A bank call I did not understand. An email chain I was suddenly excluded from. A meeting I was told had been rescheduled, only to learn later it had happened without me. Then one Friday afternoon, our lawyer looked at me with this awkward, careful expression and asked whether Daniel had explained the updated controlling structure. That was the first time I heard those words. Controlling structure. By the end of that conversation, I learned that through a series of signed amendments, voting rights changes, and debt leverage tied to expansion, Daniel had positioned himself in control. Legally, cleanly, quietly, the papers I signed had handed him the knife, and he had made sure I guided it into my own back. I confronted him that same night. He did not even try to deny it. He sat in my office, leaned back in my chair, and told me I was being emotional. He said the company needed leadership, not labor. He said I built something useful, but I was too small-minded to scale it. Then he told me something I will never forget. He said, "You were always better at building than keeping." I swung at him. I am not proud of that. I missed. He stepped back, straightened his jacket, and looked at me like I had just confirmed every story he had been telling about me behind my back. By Monday, I was out. But Daniel did not stop at taking the company. He took the story too. That was the part that almost destroyed me. He told our parents I had become unstable, reckless, and impossible to work with. He told mutual friends I had mismanaged money. He told employees I was sabotaging the transition because my ego could not handle success. And because he spoke with confidence, people believed him. Or maybe believing him was simply more convenient. My parents chose his version almost immediately. My mother cried and told me she never thought I would become so bitter. My father said I should be grateful Daniel had saved what I started. Saved it. That word nearly broke me. I had bled for that business. And now I was standing in my parents' kitchen being told to appreciate the man who stole it. I lost the company, my apartment not long after, and most of the people I thought were in my corner. For a while, I lived exactly the kind of life people pretend to understand until they see it up close. I slept in my car for 2 weeks. I showered at a cheap gym. I took short-term warehouse work under a fake explanation because I was too ashamed to tell anyone what really happened. There is a particular kind of silence that follows total humiliation. It sits in your chest and makes every day feel heavier than it should. But humiliation can do one useful thing. It burns away illusion. Once I accepted that nobody was coming to save me, I got calmer. Sharper. I stopped replaying speeches in my head. Stopped fantasizing about dramatic confrontations. Stopped caring about being understood. I focused on one thing only. Survival first, return later. I took every contract job I could get. Dispatch consulting, route planning, vendor cleanup, warehouse efficiency audits. The funny thing was, once I was forced to work outside my old company, I realized how valuable my actual skill set really was. I had been the engine all along. Not the face, not the voice, the engine. And engines do not need applause. They just need fuel. Within a year, I had a small client base. Within 2, I had built a lean operations consulting firm. No flashy branding, no debt, no fake expansion, just systems that worked. By year 3, I was making more money than I ever had in the old business. More importantly, I owned every inch of it. No brother, no partners, no signatures I had not read twice. I had scars where trust used to be, but I also had peace. Then one rainy Tuesday night, my phone rang. Daniel. I stared at his name for a full 10 seconds before answering. I expected arrogance. Maybe manipulation. Maybe another insult disguised as a favor. What I heard instead was panic. Real panic. He sounded tired, hoarse, and smaller than I had ever known him to sound. He said the company was in trouble. A major client had walked. Cash flow was collapsing. Payroll was behind. A lawsuit was brewing over contracts he did not understand. Apparently, it turns out charm is not an operating system. He told me he needed help stabilizing things. Then he said the sentence I had imagined hearing 100 different ways. I should have listened to you. For a second, I said nothing. I looked out at the rain on my window and thought about the office couch, the bank calls, my mother's tears, the gym showers, the cold nights in my car. I thought about every quiet moment where I had questioned my own worth because someone else had lied louder than I could speak. And I realized something strange. I was no longer angry in the way I used to be. The wound was still there, but it was no longer in control. Daniel kept talking. He said if I came in as a consultant, we could save the business. He said he would pay me well. He said we could fix the past. That last part almost made me laugh. You do not fix the past. You live with it. You either learn from it or it repeats itself until it finishes the job. So I asked him one question. I asked, do Mom and Dad know you called me? He went quiet. Then he admitted they did. Apparently now that the business was collapsing, the family had suddenly remembered I was the one who knew how it worked. Of course, when things were shiny, Daniel was the genius. When things started burning, I became useful again. The next day, I agreed to meet him. Not because I wanted revenge in the loud, obvious sense. Not because I wanted to scream at him across a table. I agreed because I wanted to look at the ruins with clear eyes. I wanted to see what greed does when it finally runs out of borrowed time. He looked older when I saw him. Not wiser, just worn down. The expensive confidence was still there in pieces, but it no longer fit him the way it used to. He slid financial statements across the table and tried to explain the damage. I barely needed 5 minutes. The truth was simple. He had chased image over structure, scale over stability, ego over discipline. He had spent years feeding the illusion that he was the one who made the business work. Now the illusion wanted payroll. He asked me if it could be saved. I told him yes, but probably not by him. Then I told him what recovery would actually require. Full transparency, asset liquidation, renegotiated contracts, staff restructuring, leadership removal. And no, I did not mean mine. He looked at me like he already knew what I was about to say. I told him if he wanted my help, I would only come in under one condition. He resigns. Completely. No secret control, no backdoor authority. No family pressure, no image management. He steps down, signs everything cleanly, and disappears from operations. Only then would I consider helping the company survive. He called me cruel. That part almost felt nostalgic. But cruel would have been doing what he did to me. Cruel would have been letting him hope while I slowly stripped him the way he stripped me. I was offering terms. Hard terms, fair terms. Something he had never offered me. He did not accept that day. He tried guilt, he tried family, he tried memory, he even tried anger. None of it worked. I stood up, told him he had 1 week, and walked out. 3 days later, my father called. His voice had changed. Not fully humble, not fully broken, but different. He asked if we could talk. For the first time in years, I heard uncertainty in him. My mother called too. She cried again, but this time for a different reason. Truth has a way of arriving late and still making a mess. A week after that, Daniel signed. He resigned. I did not celebrate. Some victories are too expensive to feel exciting. I stepped in not as the same man he had pushed out, but as someone far colder and far more careful. I cut what needed cutting, saved what deserved saving, and protected the employees who had been dragged into his performance. Within 8 months, the company was stable. Within 14, it was profitable again. And this time, every legal page was locked down so tightly no charming parasite could ever wear my face and call it leadership. People sometimes ask whether I forgave him. I think that is the wrong question. Forgiveness is personal. Trust is structural. Even if the first one happens, the second does not magically return. Daniel is still alive, still out there, still my brother by blood. But he is no longer inside any room that matters to my future. That is enough. If there is any lesson in what happened, it is this. Never confuse familiarity with loyalty. And never hand control of your life to someone just because they know your name, your parents, or your history. Some people study your heart only so they can find the easiest place to cut. My brother took everything from me. Then life gave him exactly what he asked for. Control. And he proved he never knew what to do with it. In the end, I did not win because I got even. I won because I survived the version of me he tried to bury. And once you survive that, people like him lose their power forever.